ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari, Tommy Orr's with me as always. Unite round was sick, I reckon, and we're going to break it all down. There's a lot to come out of the weekend just gone. Tommy, we're going to rip into Brisbane Roar, struggling, a club close to both of our hearts, I would say. Kiwi dominance continues in the A-League. What's going on there? Touch on the Socceroos as well, Tommy, but we'll start with obviously the game of the weekend, the Sydney Derby, another big win for Sydney FC. No real surprises there, to be honest, because from the outset of the season, Tommy, I don't know what you think, but I looked at their squad, I looked at the way they approached the first AFC Champions League games that they played in pre-season, and I thought, this competition's theirs to lose. And it just, the evidence for that keeps mounting, don't you think?
Agree completely, and I think, it was a real kind of... We thought after the first derby in round one that, Sydney FC was just going to go from strength to strength, but they have had their difficulties in managing probably the Asian competition as well and the loads that come with that, and obviously a few injuries, but I think this was the win that really put their season back on track, and it was a huge statement win, and they were probably unlucky not to win it by more, actually. Their
ladder position probably lies a little bit as well in terms of their dominance that I think this season as well, and you're right about their Champions League stuff. They've got Eastern SC away this weekend, the Hong Kong team on Thursday, I should say, in the AFC Champions League too, but they've struggled a little bit with sort of managing that, but I also get the sense that when you look at the depth of their squad and the players that they've got, I think they can continue to compete in both of these competitions. And I look especially at their bench on the weekend, the Derby. So the outfielders there, Jay Coleman, Jaden Kucharski, Joel King and Tiago Quintal. I reckon three of those probably walk into most starting 11s. And Tiago Quintal, who we've not seen much of, looks to be the kind of player who a lot of teams would love to have as their first option off the bench.
Absolutely. They've got, their luxury for choice. And if you look at the likes of Wahim as well, obviously on the bench in the Derby, to have a player of his calibre not in the starting lineup is, I think a lot of other A-League teams would be very jealous of that. No, I think that, if we look at the Mariners last year and what they were able to achieve in the A-League and in the Asian competitions, Sydney FC objectively has a much stronger squad this season, I think, than the Mariners did last year. So I completely agree with you. I think there's no reason that they can't, be a force to be reckoned with in both competitions. And, the injuries to Lolly and Costa early in the season, I think that, Ufi would have learnt a lot about managing these older players in both competitions, and I think we might see a lot of the younger players get more minutes, especially in the Asian competitions.
Yeah. Well, him coming off with off the bench, at halftime for Costa, planned move, 2 assists, 1 goal, and then afterwards he spoke to James Dodd, our colleague, and basically said, "You haven't seen anything yet from me." So there's levels yet in this Sydney FC team, and as I said, I think we're going to see him in both competitions. Like if they play the way they did here against Eastern, with all due respect to Eastern. It should be a very comprehensive win on the road.
I agree, and even if you look at the games where Sydney FC didn't get the good result against Auckland, for example, they were very unlucky not to get a result in that game. So sometimes results can be a little bit misleading, and I think that now we'll start to see them, go from strength to strength and pick up more points.
It's not just personnel though; it's also the way they're playing that, for me, is so compelling. What do you see in this team? First of all, that Ufuk Talay has done from last season to make them step up, and then also just like why do they stand out in this competition?
Ufi has done a fantastic job with Sydney FC, there's no doubt about it. And I think that it's a club, we discussed it a few weeks ago on the show, it's a club with a very clear philosophy and a clear identity of how they want to play, and Ufi brings it to life. I think if you look at their performance in the first half against Western Sydney, they were completely dominant. And the way that the players kind of interchange positions and empty and fill spaces. These are players playing with a lot of freedom, and I think that's when you see the best of these creative players, and he really gives the platform for them to flourish. And the one thing I loved that Ufi said after the game was he was questioned about, the Wanderers' goal just on the stroke of half-time, and he said that, if we didn't give the ball away, then with a silly mistake, then we wouldn't have conceded that goal. It wasn't that we needed to retreat and protect our lead. And I think that's what I love, is that he's very big on his principles, and he doubles down on these principles when there's a mistake. He doesn't, jeopardise or change these principles at all. And I think from a player's perspective, that's so empowering. It gives you so much confidence to have that clear messaging from a coach. So I think he's doing a fantastic job, and I can't wait to watch them play more this season.
Not enough coaches, for my liking, in this competition back themselves to that extent with what they're doing, their ideas, and just if it's not working, don't change it, keep going. And so we're going to listen to Ufi now. Some more comments in the post-match press conference, basically similar chord to exactly what you said, Tommy.
We're not going to change our beliefs. We believe this is the best way of playing. We believe this is the best brand for the club, Sydney FC. So nothing will change in that matter.
It's refreshing, and it does. We discussed it off air. It reminds me of Ange Postecoglou and the way his approach to the game, and it's so infectious and so positive that it's so nice to see a manager to have so much self-belief, and that really rubs off on the players, I think.
I'm glad you said that, because people reckon everything reminds me of Ange Postecoglou. But anyway, Jordan Courtney-Perkins, not the player of the game, but had a great game, in my opinion. Another one. One of the goals. A bit of spotlight on him during the week in terms of the golf business behind us. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. What do you like about this kid? Because I see, and we spoke about this a little bit earlier as well, it reminds me of Geordie Boss. He's obviously not on Geordie Boss's level, but a similar sort of player.
That's right. I think that he's grown and matured a lot. And I think that the exciting thing about Courtney Perkins is his ceiling, because I think that if we see his improvements year to year, and he's still so young, and he has so much experience for a player of his age, but every year he's improving incrementally, and I think his ceiling is very high, and I think that he's definitely capable of getting into the Socceroos. Right now, I think we need to see this consistency, a bit more consistency in his game, but at the same time, his performances have been really good, but in a team that's performing very well, it must be said as well, because it's a lot easier for young players and players like him to perform well in a well-oiled machine that Sydney FC is, but at the same time, he's been fantastic, and excited to see what's to come from him.
Yeah. Well, let's hear some more from Uffy now on the guy he's christened JCP.
Geordie's my 100%er. He will run through a brick wall. He will not stop. It's always a competition at training. They always look at their numbers and their data, and JCP is always the highest one that's done the most running, and he definitely does that in the game too. First half, I thought he was okay. Second half, obviously, he got the set piece goals for us. But look, for us, JCP is important. We play with width on one side, and he gives us the width on the other side, and he has some good moments. But he's still young. I think we always forget that he's still young, and he'll improve every game that he plays. For me, I'd love him to be selected for the national team, but I think that'll come down to Tony again, what he needs and what he requires. But I think he's pushing for it.
He's not there yet, but he's on the road.
That's right, and I think he's ultimately a very good defender. And I think we'll start to see more improvements in the front third. And obviously got a goal in the derby on the weekend, but I think that going forward, that's where he has the most improvement to be had. And I think that as a defender, he's one of the toughest fullbacks in the league to play against. So it's very exciting, and as Uffy just said in the press conference, hopefully we can see him in the Socceroos soon.
An interesting thing with him that the Sydney FC are going to have to, I'm sure they're figuring it out already and thinking about this, is he's 22, off contract at the end of next year.
Yep.
And what they don't want is to be in a situation where he enters next season with 1 year remaining on his contract, because, of course, from January he can start talking to other clubs. Yep. And with the A-League sort of pivoting to this whole thing about selling players, that's how we're going to maximise revenue, something they should have done for a long time ago, no doubt. But he's one where they've got to probably re-sign him soon, or probably look to sell him in the upcoming summer to make sure they maximise the value of him, because the last thing they want is what happened with the Mariners last season and Josh Nisbet, the Johnny Warren medalist, walking away on a free. A-League clubs can't have that anymore.
I agree, and I think that I feel like in this kind of situation where you've got such a young player coming through and in his current position, there's a situation where both parties can benefit. If they were to give him a longer term contract with a buyout clause that's fair for both parties, then that can be in everybody's interest, I think. And it'll also, from a player's perspective, you've got to be careful in this situation, because I had it in my career where I was going to become a free agent and I had a couple of injuries as well, and that can sometimes derail any potential transfers and these types of things. So it's a little bit of a risk versus reward situation from a player's perspective, but I think that if they could lock him down with a buyout clause that's fair for both parties, that would be great for everybody. Yeah,
there's risk on both sides, and you just got to, I guess, figure out what the best thing is for you and that club and go with that.
Exactly.
But Tommy, the other side of the coin, the other mob, the Wanderers, I don't know, like there were times they looked really good in this match, but overall, and it sort of relates to some of the stuff we've been talking about in the last few weeks, just not enough there for me from a club this size to have one win from 5 games under a new manager. They got Melbourne City this weekend, which is a pretty tough game, a dangerous game. So if they lose that, or even if they don't take full points from that, if they've got one win from their first 6, What does that say about what's going on there at this football club?
If they want to compete for trophies and be there or thereabouts at the end of the season, it's a kind of a must-win. Otherwise, the top of the table is starting to get away from them. And I think that we've seen glimpses of what they're capable of, and even in the derby, we saw in transition, they can be very dangerous going forward. They've got such lethal players in attack. But in the first half, they only managed less than 100 passes as a team. And if you want to win games and, you know, not rely on chance and not have the whole game play in transition where you attack, we attack, you attack. It becomes a bit of a lottery like that. If you want to have full control of a game and have replicable ways of winning, you need to have more possession than that. And I think that's been the biggest disappointment for them, because defensively, they look very frail in the games. And if you're only having 95 or 96 passes in a half, you're doing a lot of defending. Yeah. So you've got to be very exposed. And I think that Stajic has some big questions to answer there.
Yeah. It's the contrast for me with Sydney FC, right? Not just the way they play, but what they are as a club.
Yeah.
And everything that Sydney FC is at the moment, which is, you know, a successful club on the field, off the field, selling players regularly to Europe and Asia, clear identity top to bottom. The Wanderers are not that, but they should be that. And that's what's frustrating. That's because they're sitting on possibly the most important patch of grass in terms of Australia's
and the most fertile.
Nursery. Yeah. And they should be way better than this, in my opinion. They should be able to approach a game, because they're a big club from a big part of the country with big football heritage. They shouldn't be the underdogs in any game they walk into. They should be like Sydney FC do, and some of the greatest teams we've seen in A-League history do, going into games dictating how games are played.
And I think that's been the frustrating thing. I think that's where a lot of the criticism has come from the Wanderers and their personnel of choice in the starting lineups, is they haven't gone into games thinking, how can we dominate the other team? It's very much been a more pragmatic approach, I think, and there's been a lot of emphasis on defence and press. But I think with the likes of Mata, which I'm sure we'll touch on shortly, you should be going into games thinking, I want to have the ball this whole game, and we want to get 3 or 4 goals past this mob, and have that kind of, it's not arrogance, because it's if you can, I don't know, with the players they've got, they should be able to back it up, I think, or at least have a clear intent to do so. But you know, if we look at their performances week after week, we're not seeing incremental improvements towards a bigger vision. It's just kind of...
That's been the way for like almost a decade now as well, which is the thing, and we're going to talk about Alan Stajic in a second and hear from him on the elephant in the room right there. But it's not all on him, because this stuff should have been in place a long time ago.
That's right. And you have to give him time to implement his ideas, but at the same time, after the first 5 games or 6 games, it's not clear what his ideas are. What kind of football does he want the Wanderers to play? What is their identity? I don't think there's a clear answer to that.
Yeah. And where does he fit into the picture? One matter. Well, let's hear from Staj right now on that, and also his comments on Fahid Ben Khalfala's comments as well.
This has all come up because his agent, you know, said some stuff in the media last week. His agent doesn't control the team. You know, we've got 25 field players in there who I'm concerned about. We've got 20 staff members attached to the club. We've got 20,000 members. They're my priority, and every single one of those is an equal priority. You know, one's come into the team, he's humble. You know, I've got 12 guys who don't play every game. I don't get phone calls from every single agent whose player's not playing. So, you know, I think he's got a bit too much oxygen, to be honest. Fahid, and his comments were out of order. They were cowardly, and they were cowardly for a number of reasons. You know, I've only spoken to him 2 or 3 times in my life, to be honest. And he's spoken to me about how so many of his players that he has in Australia have been mistreated by coaches, and you know, they've been vilified or abused emotionally, physically, whatever. And he's never opened his mouth to protect his player. And his player on this occasion was on the bench, and that's disrespect. You know, I think his comments were cowardly. You know, if he had some courage, he would have stood up for his players before last year when they were in the positions they were in. You know, across the world. You know, so I don't like hearing stories like that, and then all of a sudden he's got the courage to come out and speak now, you know, without any comeback or right of reply.
Obviously very strong words there, but I think it misses the point a little bit, because I think that if you look at, say for example, at Sydney FC when they had Del Piero or Dwight York, players of similar calibre, if they were on the bench and the team wasn't winning, there would also be a lot of questions asked then. So I feel like it's, you know, pretending that Mata is just another player misses the point entirely.
He's not.
He's not. He's the player.
I was at the unveiling press conference where they spoke about him being not just another player. They spoke about him being an exemplary human being, a leader, someone who can do all this stuff.
And the player who's won World Cups, Champions Leagues. I mean, I don't. He probably is, in terms of trophies won, the most credentialed player to ever play in the A-League with Del Piero. So we're talking about a player that knows how to win football games, that has so much quality and experience. And if the team's not winning, I feel like and he's not being involved, then there's going to be questions asked. So I do sympathise for Stajic in terms of, emotions are high after a big loss like that, but I do think that he's missed the point a little bit with his response. But ultimately going forward, I think we all just want to watch Mata play and see what influence he can have on this team. And given not just 45 minutes and criticised for not pressing, because what he can bring to the football team is so much more than just that. And I think we'll see the best of the Wanderers if he does that.
The millions of people who watch the show on a weekly basis as well will know that the first thing that Stadge said in that clip is not right, which is this has only come up because of what Fahid said.
Yeah.
It's not true. We spoke about this on this show before then, and as you say, it's natural. A marquee player, by definition, is going to have a spotlight on them, and if they're not playing, the question's going to be why, and then the sub-question is, as we've also discussed, why'd you sign him if you're not going to play him?
That's
it makes
right.
no sense.
And maybe Stajic didn't sign him. So, and I think that...
It increasingly looks that way to me.
I think the same thing. But at the same time now, they've got him, and you've got a huge asset and a weapon, and I think they should use him.
Yeah. Just quickly, what did you think from what he showed when he came on? I thought when Mata came on, the Wanderers were able to at least control the way that the game went for the first time in what feels like actually quite a long time.
Absolutely. And, he played in that deeper role that we discussed in the show in the last few weeks that he probably should be playing. But, he did make a couple of mistakes as well, but I think that his overall influence was very good. And I think there was a statistic that he's created, the Wanderers' most chances.
Well, I've got the numbers here. He is number one at the Wanderers for expected assists per 90, the most chances generated at the club. He's also second in accurate passes per 90 and third in possessions won in the final third per 90, which says he's creating and he can also help and do other things when you don't have the ball. And
coming onto a game in the situation that he did in the context, I feel like if he was given 90 minutes after a few weeks in a row, we would see this even grow even more. And we'd also see other players develop an understanding of playing with him. And, when he gets the ball and faces forward, we'll probably see the likes of, Borrello make these forward runs and they can, form a relationship of some sort. It's really hard with players that you haven't played with before to come on, and he's probably looking to play short passes and link up with players, and they're on a different wavelength. He needs to be given a run of 3 or 4 games, and I think he can turn the Wanderers' fortunes around.
He also needs to be in a midfield setup where he's not exposed if the ball does turn over, as he was for one of those goals, because as anyone who's watched the Premier League will say and know, that's never been his game in terms of the intensity, the harrying and all that sort of stuff. He played for Chelsea, Man United, won a World Cup with Spain for not being that player.
That's right. And if you look at the players that have been very influential in the A-League over the years, Thomas Broich, Ninkovic, Diamante recently, they weren't pressing either, but they could really influence the game of football with the ball. And that, I think, judging him from his pressing is missing the point. So I think that setting up the team around him and getting him involved as much as possible and letting other players develop an understanding with him, I think is important for the Wanderers.
So Stadge's presser wasn't the only post-match sort of dramas around the Wanderers. I thought this was really interesting what happened post-match with the players standing in front of the RBB, basically copping a dressing down.
Yep.
I've personally never seen it before, Tommy. Have you ever seen anything like that?
I've experienced it a few times, more times than I'd like to admit probably in my career, but not in the A-League. And you can never tell fans or supporters how they should feel. I understand as a Wanderers fans, they would be feeling very upset with how things are unfolding at their club, over the last 5 or 6 years really. But at the same time, in terms of actions, is this going to help turn things around? Is this going to give the players the confidence? Because I feel like the players are putting everything on the line when they play. It's not that the players aren't trying on the pitch. I don't think this is constructive. So if I'm a fan and I'm frustrated, I feel like there might be more effective ways to voice that frustration rather than just yelling at players. Because
I also reckon they're aiming it at the wrong place because say what you want about how the Wanderers played the other night, but I don't think the reason why they lost is because of a lack of player effort.
Absolutely
I think the questions... the berations they're delivering should probably be delivered to the people who run the club and manage the club.
That's right. Because
they haven't been able to sort out all the things we spoke about earlier about identity and all that, because that's where it effectively comes down to. You can't blame the players for that.
And I think the players, for the Wanderers have been disjointed at times this season, but you can see the players are giving everything on the pitch. There's no question of effort. And, from a player's perspective, if I was on the receiving end of that dressing down, it's not going to give me more confidence to play next week. If anything, it's going to make you go in your shell. So I think that whilst I understand the place where that came from, I think that it wasn't helpful.
Yeah. Well, it could always be worse, Tommy. You could be Perth Glory, who have the worst start in A-League history so far with 1 draw and 4 losses from 1 game. Or you could be Brisbane Roar, who may actually take that title off them this weekend, which is incredible. No team has lost the first 5 games of an A-League season, but that could be them. They're away to Macarthur on Saturday night. You are from the Gold Coast. I used to live in Brisbane for a long time. I feel like Brisbane is such an important part of the Australian football ecosystem. I think we've previously said they're number 2 in the country in terms of Queensland for participants in the game.
Yep.
There's so many players who leak from Queensland to other states and clubs that should be coming through in Brisbane. But at the moment, I don't know. I don't know. And part of it is they have copped a bad draw.
They have. Like, if you look at it objectively, and I actually think some of their performances haven't been bad. The problem for them is that games are won and lost in both boxes. And in the front third, they haven't created enough clear-cut opportunities. If we look at the game on the weekend against Adelaide, they actually dominated the first half largely, but they weren't really able to manufacture too many clear-cut opportunities. And on the other end of the coin, you look at them defensively, every time other teams attack against them, they look like they're going to score. So I think that for them,
that goal was incredibly easy.
It was, and there's not much resilience to the team. And I think that losing Tommy Aldred wasn't the best defender in the league, but he really was a leader at the back, and he organised the team and gave them a lot of belief defensively. And I feel like there's a bit of a hole there that they haven't filled. So
leadership and quality, a little bit similar to me with Newcastle.
Yeah,
similar space, good young players, some okay players, but. And you can see that 1 or 2 extra.
And you see glimpses of good things over 90 minutes, but there's, costly mistakes, naive mistakes that make it really hard to get results. And for them now to bounce back from this, losing becomes a habit. And like winning championships and championship winning teams always say that winning is a habit. Losing is also a habit. And it can become like a really hard thing to shake, because you can have a really good performance, but if you're a team that's losing week in, week out, you can almost start orchestrating a way to lose. And I've experienced that before, at the Mariners in 2018, when unfortunately I was injured for a lot of the season. But at the same time, from a collective perspective, we weren't able to kind of, change our mindset or get out of the hole that we dug ourselves in. And I think that's the risk for Brisbane Roar, is that if they can't get a win on the board, then they can dig themselves into a similar hole.
So the draw I mentioned before, by the way, it's Auckland away, Sydney FC home, Melbourne Victory away, and Adelaide United neutral territory, I guess, in Sydney. That is tough. MacArthur away is tough.
Yeah.
How much can we put on the coach? How much can we put on the players? How much do we just say they've got the roughest start to begin with? We'll find out. I don't know. Let's hear now, though, quickly from Ruben Zakovic, who mentioned the draw as maybe a mitigating factor as to why they're struggling so much.
Definitely in the first half, it was a big step forward for us. A lot of intent. We created some really good chances, played some good football. So there's a lot to take out of that. Obviously disappointing to lose, the opening 4 games, but I would say that they're difficult games. If I'm honest, Auckland away, brand new club. Sydney FC at home in the middle of Champions League, good side. Melbourne Victory away. Adelaide in form. And in a lot of those games have been very close and very competitive. So fallen short, which isn't good enough, and we need to improve. But we'll continue to build.
How safe is he?
I think he's safe for now. I think they'll give him the benefit of the doubt and give him time, because it is true they have had a really difficult start. But I think on neutral ground they should be. There's no reason that Brisbane can't compete with the likes of an Adelaide. And I think that them losing that game on the weekend really was probably the first major setback for them this season.
Yeah. All right. To the top of the table, which is where the Kiwis live at the moment, apparently.
Yeah.
Funny world. But it's been fantastic. I mean, Auckland, another, look, not a great performance overall.
Yeah.
Maybe MacArthur should have taken the lead against them earlier, but they come away from their first trip to Australia with another win. And they're looking to become the 3rd team ever to win their first 5 matches to start a season. No expansion teams, of course, have already done anything like that.
Yeah.
They've also not conceded in 5 games.
That's right.
4 games, sorry. The A-League record is 5 games.
Yeah.
And the NSL record is 7 games without conceding. So they're in a space here which is actually historic.
Yeah. And I think that, the talking about them not conceding a goal, I think that's been very much the foundation of their success so far this season, because they haven't really been a team that's looked to dominate possession or anything, but they've signed and recruited very experienced players in key positions, and they've relied on the likes of Jake Brimmer in terms of moments of individual brilliance in the front third, and Guillermo May obviously got his first goal on the weekend, and I think that he's been very good so far in their game. So, being very compact and solid defensively, and then relying on individual brilliance in attack is being very much their foundation, and it's been very successful so far.
What I like about their recruitment as well, and it's probably a consequence of them being a Kiwi team and not an Aussie team, only 3 of their players from the starting 11 on the weekend had played in the A-League before this season. Which is good. So it's not only is it a good team, it's a fresh team.
That's right.
It's a fun team for us to sort of learn about and look at these players for the first time, huh?
Because we always criticise A-League clubs for just recycling players and going with known quantities. So as you just said, it's refreshing to see them, cast the net wider and bring in some players that we haven't seen before. And I think Vestrata for them in the midfield, I think he's been one of the best signings of the season so far because in terms of leadership and physical presence in the middle of the pitch, he's been huge for them.
Yeah. What about Wellington? Last season was, look, we didn't really know what to expect from Giancarlo Italiano in his first campaign in charge, and there were times when you thought they were riding their luck a little bit too much, and they got really far, and it was great to see the way they did it as well. Same vibes again this season, which makes me think...
Not coincidence.
Yeah, like maybe he really knows what he's doing, huh?
I think so, and I think that they were a little bit fortunate to win the game on the weekend. I think Melbourne Victory had the much better of the chances, but they found a way to stay in the game. And the thing I like about Phoenix this season is I think their performances each week have been improving incrementally because they started slow and we thought, going forward, especially with their front third players, we thought, are they going to be able to score goals like they did last season? But I think that on the weekend, they were still very lively going forward, and Costa Barbarouses was absolutely immense. I thought that was probably the standout performance of the whole round. He was fantastic, and I think they'll be there or thereabouts at the end of the season, and I think they're growing nicely into the season.
Well, they got a bye, so they can rest up ahead of the New Zealand derby again on December 7th.
Yeah.
And Auckland have Newcastle this weekend, and you'd imagine, and that's it's at home.
Yep.
So, I mean, look, no disrespect to the Jets, but if Auckland aren't winning that, there's a problem.
That's right.
So you've got two red-hot teams going into a derby again, and Wellington probably looking for revenge.
And I think that the last derby there was so much anticipation for the first New Zealand derby, but I think this one will be even more anticipated because of the form of the teams, because of the banter. That's really kind of evolving into such a great derby for the league, and with both teams playing such great football, it's going to be interesting to see. And I still think there's a big question mark with Auckland about if they concede the first goal, what they're going to do, because they play so pragmatically. If they go behind, they're going to have to change. So I think that Wellington will go into this game against Auckland in a couple of weeks with a different mindset to they did with the first derby and probably a lot more confident.
All right, Tommy, we'll rip into some extra time to finish off. 3 minutes. We'll start with the lull moment from last week for me, the golf situation. Players from two sides of the same city in derby week playing golf together. Is that acceptable?
Look, obviously a lot of players are always going to have friends in other teams, but I think the optics of that one was poor, and I think that if the players had their time again, they certainly wouldn't put it on social media. But
well, it was the golfer they played with who put it on social media, so they might have got stitched up a little bit. Actually.
True, and I think playing golf as well, like in the with a big game that week, I'm not sure that was the best idea either.
Dylan Leonard from Western United, the teenage centre back, he's looked really assured on the ball from what I've seen so far. He's the youngest player to score and be sent off in the same match in the A-League. Has he impressed you, Tommy, and what do you like about him and what he's shown so far?
He's been a bolt from the blue because, going into the season, I didn't really know too much about him and wasn't expecting him to start. And for him to be playing so well, and to play centre-back in a team is very hard as a young player because there's so much responsibility and you need to have a lot of maturity tactically as well in that position. And I think he's been great, and obviously it was disappointing to see him get a red card, but I think, going forward and looking at the big picture, I think that there's a lot of room for growth for him, and Western United should be excited that they got him.
Brian Kaltak, talking to centre-backs, gave himself a 10 out of 10 for his performance in the F3 derby, which I rated.
Yeah, same.
How important is he for the Mariners, and do you think there's more out there in terms of Oceania talent for A-League clubs to harvest?
Well, he waited so long to get his opportunity in the A-League, and he's taken it with both hands. And we saw last year how good he was. And I think that's exactly right. And I think that in Oceania and Southeast Asia, there's so much untapped talent for A-League teams to start scouting more extensively. And hopefully he can be the first of many.
An idea, it's been floated before, is just to give every team an OFC slot.
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
There's stuff out there, especially with World Cup qualifying, changing things a little bit in Oceania and levels lifting.
Yep.
Tommy, 15 years ago, Pep Guardiola was coaching Lionel Messi at Barcelona. Ange Postecoglou was coaching at Brisbane Roar with you. This past weekend, Ange beat Pep, a massive result for Spurs, 4-0 at Man City. How incredible is that, just for Australian football and coaches
If you
as well?
see, I think Ange as well, like sometimes you forget, because he's had so much success and it's been so incremental, you kind of forget. But when you look at it from a bird's eye view, where he's come from, where he is now, it's absolutely remarkable, and all Aussies love watching it. So I think it's fantastic, and hopefully he can go from strength to strength.
Much better calibre of players he's dealing with now compared to
that's the thing.
Days, right?
And if he could, it's true though.
Basically.
If he could do
it, you're all right.
It's true. If he could do it with us, then I think he can do it with the best players in the world. So.
I think so. On the Socceroos, Tommy, obviously we recorded last week just before the Bahrain game. We saw that 2-2. It's crunch time now. They play again in March.
Yeah.
Which players need to have a good 3-4 month period for the Socceroos to feel really confident about that window?
I think if you look at the Socceroos' problems, they're largely in the front third, and the one player I want to see have a breakout next few months is Daniel Azani, because I still think he has so much to offer the Socceroos, and we saw glimpses on the weekend, but with no real end product. But I think that if he can get a string of games, get some goals and assists, I think we can see him come and make a real difference for that team. For me, it's Kusini Yengi, ex-A-League product at Portsmouth, has shown signs here and there for the Socceroos that he could be the main man, but I don't want to see signs. I want to see proof for a long period of time and consistent as well. I think it's really important that he does. His country needs him to, actually. They do, yeah.
And we need to go, Tommy.
That's right.
Another week in the can.
Enjoyable, thanks for that.
No, thank you for coming along. It is your job after all.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone at home for watching as well. We'll catch you next week. See you later.